5.
We have had free speech for a very long time in the United Kingdom, and now we don't.
4.
Barricaded the door in case a bunch of heavy goons come and take me away.
3.
Angela Rayner Union Jack thong. Don't forget that.
2.
Our courts have become a means of campaigning for left-wing activists.
1. We have liftoff.
Welcome once again to Planet Normal, the Telegraph podcast with Allison Pearson.
Hello.
And me, Liam Halligan. We're back from our summer holidays co-pilot. Not that we got much of a holiday, of course, as lots was happening during August. You were literally swept from your beachside sun lounger by a tsunami of news, returning early to the UK to meet Lucy Connolly after her prison release was confirmed. That extended interview was released last week as a Planet Normal special, alongside our best of episodes over the last 3 weeks featuring some of our most interesting recent interviews. And now we're back properly, Allison, and in the nick of time, because the comic genius that's Graham Linehan, creator of Father Ted, The IT Crowd and other much-loved sitcoms, has been arrested at Heathrow, detained by 5 armed officers, again for sending tweets that to some are mildly offensive. Another chilling example of how free speech is dying in Britain. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner's wriggling after being caught underpaying 40 grand in stamp duty on a property sale. That's after weeks of gnawing concern about the broader state of Britain's public finances, with financial markets pushing up long-term government borrowing costs to a 27-year high. And now Rachel Reeves has announced her next budget statement won't be until Wednesday, the 26th of November. So get set for almost 3 months of glorious angst as UK firms and households stand by for another tax clobbering. Meanwhile, Yvette Cooper's announced new asylum restrictions. Really? And dear listeners, rejoice, because after more than a year of Labour in power, Phase 1 of Keir Starmer's government's now easing into Phase 2. Yes, the Prime Minister really said that, as he brought in 3 new economic advisers who reassured financial markets so much UK borrowing costs were pushed up even more, now way higher than any other G7 nation. But let's start, Allison, with Nigel Farage's testimony to America's House Judiciary Committee on Capitol Hill in Washington, which you and I have just watched, the Reform leader talking about British and European threats to American free speech, focusing on the UK's incoming online safety laws. How significant do you think it is, Allison, that the mighty US is now getting involved in Britain's free speech debate? And how do you think Farage did?
Well, I think we're lucky to still be on air, to be honest.
I barricaded the door in case a bunch of heavy goons come and take me away.
Let's make use of what little free speech we've got left in the United Kingdom.
While we've got it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's quite controversial for the leader of Reform to be going to give this, statement to the House Judiciary Committee. And the topic there, listeners probably know, is Europe's threat to American speech and innovation. And really, Nigel was invited to talk about, specifically the UK's Online Safety Act. Obviously, he's had some criticism before going, and today, Wednesday, in Prime Minister's questions, Keir Starmer accused Farage of trash talking the UK. But as Nigel Farage said, it's the UK that's damaging itself in the eyes of the world. And I really do think that, Liam, now, I think it's absolutely astonishing. We'll come on to talking about the absolutely appalling Graham Linehan case, which, of course, Farage referenced in his evidence. And I thought he did extremely well. He's a very, very adept performer without a script. He'd been given a bit of a hard time by one of the panel, Representative Ruskin, I think it was, in the intro.
The charming Mr. Ruskin, as Farage referred to him.
Yeah, and he was very amiable, but he landed some pretty hard-hitting points talking about the immense damage that the undoubted now censorship in the UK is doing, not just to British people, but to our international reputation as a sort of cradle of liberty. He referenced the Magna Carta and, of course, the Voltairean principle of, I may not like what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. So I thought he did extremely well. And he raised also a person I've been very involved with, Lucy Connolly. Listeners will know I've been very, passionately involved in campaigning for Lucy, whom I do feel has been treated as a political prisoner in the United Kingdom with any number of unfairnesses. Now, Nigel said he had wanted to bring Lucy to Washington to sit by him as an emblem of what's happening to free speech in the UK. And I happen to know, Liam, that there was tussling at the highest level. So Lucy, who throughout the history of her arrest, at every turn, she's been denied the normal rights afforded to even very, very bad, dangerous people. So denied bail, denied sort of given a swingeing sentence, then arriving in jail, denied access to the normal periods of day leave at home with her child. So Lucy's been treated appallingly throughout. And just to add to the fun, she came out. We were delighted that she actually did come out on her release date. And she came out with very, very strict license conditions attached. And those have been described to me as monstrous. And Lucy's license conditions are effectively what would be given to a very, very serious sex offender. So just let that sink in. And one of the conditions was no foreign travel. Nigel Farage very much wanted her to go to DC, and we were making plans for her to make that trip. I was going to be accompanying her. But it comes as no surprise, Liam, does it, to know that people who are very, very senior in the UK, for obvious reasons, don't want a Northampton childminder and very, very nice lady to be sitting there in Washington as an emblem of what the state, the cruel state, which wants to silence its critics, particularly around immigration, what it can do. But yes, overall, I thought that Nigel acquitted himself very well. What did you think, co-pilot?
Yeah, I think he's very good in these situations. I was reminded of, believe it or not, very different character, but George Galloway giving testimony to one of the House committees when he was accused of various nefarious activities in the oil industry. And he really read those investigators the Riot Act. Nigel Farage was more emollient but firm nonetheless. It was only a short testimony. There'll be now a written deposition. But very interesting that he mentioned Lucy Connolly as prominently as he did. And of course, we haven't heard the last from that Northampton mum. I do think she's going to become an emblematic figure. She's already a Trivial Pursuit question, if you like. I do predict, actually, she could play a major role either indirectly or even directly in British public life. But let's wait and see. And it amazes me, and again, this was mentioned by Farage and indeed by other US lawmakers too, it's as if the British state has compounded their error by arresting Graham Linehan, who isn't even a British citizen. The guy's Irish. He's obviously very well known in the UK. He is a comic institution who in recent years has campaigned. He's got daughters. He's campaigned in the way that you and I have for standing up for gender-based rights, if you like, for getting involved in this very fraught trans debate. But Graham Linehan has been absolutely walloped. The comedy industry basically cancelled him. The kind of arty-farty TV commissioners cancelled him. He's had his own Father Ted West End Broadway show canned, which has massively undermined his income. The guy lost his marriage. It's been absolutely terrible. And now he gets arrested. 5 police officers detaining him for 3 tweets. And we now just seem to be in a state of pass the parcel. Straight away, amid public outrage, Keir Starmer starts saying, oh, that's really wrong. We shouldn't be doing that. And then you had the head of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Mark Rowley, saying, as if the police didn't do it, saying, oh, we need to change or clarify the law following the arrest of Graham Linehan, almost talking about this in the third person when he's actually the chief cop in the southeast of England. It's just through the looking glass stuff.
Of the 2 people who should be resigning this week, one is the Deputy Prime Minister. We're going to come on to her. But Sir Mark Rowley. So this is what they do, Liam, when there's a case like this. Obviously, my case with the police was far more minor. But what they do is they'll say, oh, yes, we should be policing the streets, not tweets. And then nothing gets done. And what Mark Rowley did, which I thought was disgraceful, as you say, talking about it in the third person. So he said, police shouldn't be dragged into toxic culture wars. No. It's not a toxic culture war. It's a man who's expressed his legitimate opinion, who you've then absolutely sent astonishing overreach, even if you think that Graham Linehan should even be questioned about his free expressions, which I do not, to actually, go and arrest him, send his blood pressure soaring. He was very, very lucky not to have a stroke. And this is, luckily, Graham was able, he was banned, of course, from tweeting about the experience. This is what the regime does. Do you know, Liam, I'm so angry, okay? I know it's early in the term, but how dare they, right? How dare they? This state, okay, let's just look at phase one. You talked about phase two, right? Phase one of Starmer's rule: bankrupt the country, achieve the highest energy bills in the developed world, record business closures, job losses up, small boats crossings reach a record high. And then he's got the nerve to announce phase two, because obviously phase one's been an absolutely brilliant success. And in phase two, on the day one of phase two, is arrested, as you say, a comic genius who is absolutely persecuted by these people. It is absolutely unconscionable. And then he had the nerve, listeners will remember, in the White House, when under pressure from J.D. Vance, who was talking to Keir Starmer about worries about the infringements on free speech in Britain. There's Starmer piggly babbling, oh, we've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last.
Painted rictus grin, my God.
No, we have had free speech for a very long time in the United Kingdom, and now we don't. And it's absolutely horrendous. The Free Speech Union reckons that 30 people a day, Liam, are being arrested for retweets and cartoons. And somebody like Graham Linehan, obviously you wouldn't wish it on anybody, because what he went through was totally horrific. But at least when it's someone like that, and I've got here in front of me two of today's newspapers. The Sun, you'll have to say this in an Irish accent, Britain's Fecht, there's a outrageous Father Ted genius arrested by 5 gun cops over anti-trans tweets. And then the front page of the Daily Mail, when did Britain become North Korea? So this is day one of phase two. No, I'm serious. Listen.
Strap yourself in, so am I.
Just absolutely. And Graham, brilliantly, actually, I can highly recommend on Graham Linehan's Substack, where you'll find a wonderfully balanced and droll account. Of course, he was still reeling from distress at this. And Graham said, in a country where paedophiles escape sentencing, where knife crime is out of control, where women are assaulted and harassed every time they gather to speak, the state had mobilized 5 armed officers to arrest a comedy writer for this tweet. And he does say, Liam, that the Mail officers were mostly polite, but clearly nonplussed by the politics of it all, just doing their jobs, however insane those jobs had become. Now, this is something I know a lot about. I am suing Essex Police, as listeners will know. And what we know now, Liam, is the College of Policing, which is woke central, indoctrinates police officers into thinking that their job is basically to impose values. We've stopped enforcing the law, and now we're policing the population for the correct values. And of course, those mean leftist values that accord with the world outlook of Starmer and his, I was going to say henchmen, maybe that's a bit unkind.
Hench people. Come on, this is a Labour government.
Hench people. Yes, it's hench people. Can you interrupt me? Because I'm just going to go, I'm boiling over
Hench persons.
Hench persons.
Hench persons. So, look, Angela Rayner. I mean, look, what's really happened here is not only has she cast yet further question marks on her own competence, her own suitability to be a senior politician. To be frank, she's also made life a lot more difficult for Rachel Reeves. Now, Rachel Reeves has had a torrid summer. Myself and others have been highlighting, rightly, I don't apologise for this, that the 30-year government borrowing cost has been spiralling upward. It hit 5.75 at one point on Wednesday morning. The nearest equivalent is in the US, where borrowing costs are well below 5%. In the likes of Greece, Spain and Italy, they're nearer 4%. We are now a significant outlier. Our inflation over the summer was awful. It's now 3.8%, while inflation in the UK is going up. It's steady or going down across the rest of the G7. We are now an outlier. All that makes the UK's massive national debt much more expensive to service. We now have a 30-year borrowing cost up at where it was in 1998, a 27-year high. The difference, Allison, is that in 1998, the size of the national debt on which we were paying debt service was 36% of GDP. It's now the thick end of 100% of GDP. And that is why we're spending twice as much on debt interest as we spend on defence. That's why we're spending more on debt interest than we do on schools. Now, spool forward to the budget, which we now know is announced this morning, Wednesday, is going to be on Wednesday, the 26th of November. Utterly mad. Why wait so long? Why wait so long? It's just the best part of 3 months of angst, of no investment, of the housing market being absolutely frozen because of massive stamp duty, of angst, of Labour, waiting for a miracle, hoping growth will emerge from somewhere, hoping something will happen. And what Reeves has been highlighting, what her people in the dark have been highlighting, is that she won't break her manifesto pledge not to raise national insurance, income tax or VAT, though she did, of course, already raise national insurance on employers, which was passed on to shoppers and passed on in the form of less hiring and lower wages. So ordinary folk suffered. She is intimating she's going to be doing complex taxes on property and wealth and all the rest of it. Up rocks Angela Rayner with a very simple situation. She's got 2 houses that she owns. She needs to pay more stamp duty when she's buying a second home than when she's buying her first home, right? She claims it was too complicated for her to understand. Her first line of defence was, I'm just a working class girl from Stockport or whatever. She's a deputy prime minister of this country. She'll have hot and cold running accountants on tap. All she has to do is ask for them. So she's claiming the property tax is already too complicated. And Reeves is about to make them, 20 times more complicated and more onerous. It really does box in Rachel Reeves even more, just as Rayner boxed in Reeves when she accidentally on purpose leaked a memo that she'd written to Reeves of ways to raise extra tax revenue. So as we ease into phase 2 of Starmer's government, very mainstream people, very non-political people are now raising the alarm about the economy, and very expert people. Over the holidays, of course, I interviewed Professor Jajit Chadha, who was the chairman, the director of the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, probably Britain's leading economic think tank, very much a moderate, herbivorous kind of economist, noted world-class expert on central banking around the world, on bond markets, on macroeconomic policy, Cambridge professor. He gave me an interview for my When the Facts Change Substack, which the Telegraph then splashed on a couple of weekends ago, and rightly so, because it was a very powerful interview from somebody who, is of undeniable integrity and authority, not just me, not just a scribbling hack writing a column, but somebody of genuine, noted establishment expertise. And the Telegraph did a great job off the back of my Chadha interview. Andrew Sentence weighed in, another former member of the MPC, Monetary Policy Committee at the Bank of England, very widely respected, again, an apolitical figure. Willem Boyter weighed in, one of the original founding members of the MPC from the late 90s. Again, no friend of the Conservatives. In fact, he is a self-declared man of the left, Willem Boyter. Both of them, Andrew Sentence and Willem Boyter, saying as Chadha did, we now face a 1976-style IMF meltdown. Maybe that's phase 3 of Starmer's government co-pilot. The one where he starts to do Dennis Healey impressions. Oh, sorry, that would be Rachel Reeves, wouldn't it? Crikey.
I did wake up in the night a couple of nights ago and find myself thinking about whether I should get some tins in. Well, literally, we should say to Planet Normal listeners who haven't been paying close attention to the media over the summer that Halligan's been going around like Nostradamus on his bike. And Cass, our producer, and I thought we should get in one of those big, long, black velvet cloaks with a hood and maybe a side.
As long as I can get my sandwich board on over it. I tell you what, we need to extend the Planet Normal franchise, Alison. We need to start flogging Planet Normal Labour Phase 3 survival kits, right? So you're in there, you're going to get your tin of OXO, you're going to get your candles, you're going to get some cards, you're going to get some crayons and a pad so you can do your homework by candlelight.
Your Angela Rayner Union Jack thong. Don't forget that. That always comes in handy for signalling how patriotic you are. Let's just come back. We've obviously got this huge economic sort of crisis going on, but I think we should just say that Rayner's position now is, well, I would say it was untenable. And why is it untenable? Well, yes, perhaps if it wasn't Angela Rayner, she could maybe get away with an apology and an excuse. But this woman got to the top by basically attacking the Tories for being hypocrites, greedy bastards. You'll remember she attacked Nadeem Zahawi, Jeremy Hunt over their property situation. So there's this huge hypocrisy. We know she'd have been saying Tory scum with their, noses in the trough. So this is socialist noses in the trough. She's had Labour colleagues going out covering for her, saying, oh, there's nothing to see here. She's also the housing minister. Doesn't look very good, does it? But as jobs go, you'd think that might be a bit of something you'd be familiar with, some of your own legislation. And as you said, Liam, that they're looking at raising taxes on property, and they've got their second most important.
He's not going to sack her. He hasn't got the guts to sack her, and she will take advantage of the fact that he can't sack her. I almost think she's done this semi on purpose to demonstrate yet again to her own Labour Party backbenchers that she is untouchable.
No, I don't agree. I bet you by this time next week she'll be gone. And even the sort of stalwart lefty commentators, Dan Hodges, Kevin Maguire, the true believers, they are saying this is absolutely appalling. And it's coming at such a bad moment because the cost of living crisis, which we've obviously on Planet Normal covered a lot. I don't care what the official figures say about food inflation. Most people I know are now squealing when they go and do their weekly shop. It's absolutely horrendous. We've got the energy price caps just gone up. We're going to have a winter of discontent. People are going to have bills that many people aren't even going to be able to afford. And we've got this woman, class warrior, dreadful Tories. And can I just say, I've been really incensed to read these pieces saying, oh, they just got it in for her because she's working class, or it's sexist because she's a woman. Not at all. And I hate as a woman when people say, oh, they've only got it in for her because she's a woman. She's been caught bang to rights. I don't think she can survive it. And if, as you say, if she does survive it, what on earth does that say about phase 3? Phase 3. What is phase 3? Is it nuclear war? Just...
This week's guest is a returning Planet Normal stowaway, the Right Honourable Suella Braverman MP, former Home Secretary and former Conservative leadership candidate. A leading Eurosceptic, Suella was also chair of the Commons European Research Group, a former Attorney General, and she's been MP for Fareham and Waterlooville, previously Fareham, since 2015. Born in the northwest London to parents who'd emigrated to Britain from Kenya and Mauritius respectively, Suella studied law at Cambridge and was called to the bar in 2005. In recent years, she's become a leading advocate of the UK leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, the subject of a paper she recently published with the Prosperity Institute, link in the show notes to this episode. I started by asking Suella Braverman if leaving the ECHR is what she now wants to hear as party policy from the Conservative leadership.
I've been wanting to hear this from the Conservative leadership for several years. I think I was one of the first sitting cabinet members or ministers of the last Conservative administration to come out publicly in favour of withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights back in 2022. I was received with a lot of criticism and backlash from my own colleagues at the time, but I'm very pleased that 3 years on, opinion seems to have shifted, and many of those same colleagues are now agreeing with me, actually, and have seen the light on this issue. That I think is absolutely essential that the Conservative Party makes an unequivocal commitment now that if it were to win the next general election, it will absolutely withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights.
Give us some colour, Suella. What's it like to be Home Secretary when the UK is in the European Convention of Human Rights. Did you ever feel that the UK was over-interpreting the judgments from Strasbourg lawyers?
Well, the turning point for me was the flights to Rwanda that were grounded effectively by judges who were sitting in the Strasbourg court, who applied a pretty opaque and dubious process in the form of Rule 39 interim orders, and who at the last minute overruled English courts to stop those flights from taking off to Rwanda. And that was really the death knell for the Rwanda scheme. Everyone will remember that moment. People were glued to their TV screens watching as to whether the flights would take off. And one by one, the migrants were taken off the plane because they were able to secure injunctions ultimately from the Strasbourg court. And that scuppered the whole plan, and that set off a whole spiral of legal cases and appeals and counter appeals that ended in the whole scheme collapsing, really. So, one of the big symptoms of our membership of the European Convention has been our inability to control our borders and stop the boats. That's one such problem. My report that I set out and published in July refers to many other policy areas where the convention has stymied the government's ability to deliver its democratic mandate.
Do you feel that the convention basically scuppered the Rwanda policy? Would you bring back the Rwanda policy now? Can you foresee Labour ever bringing back the Rwanda policy?
So I do think that it was our membership of the European Convention on Human Rights, plus the Human Rights Act, and the extensive judicial review arrangements that we have in this country that all worked to block the Rwanda policy and ultimately defeat it. And so, as I set out, originally they stopped the flights from taking off. That was the first intervention, really, by the Strasbourg court. That was foreign judges in a foreign court applying the European Convention as they saw fit to stop a democratically elected government from entering into a legitimately negotiated arrangement with a third country, Rwanda. Following that, and through the appeals right up to the Supreme Court, the Rwanda scheme was found to be unlawful because it breached the obligations and the articles in the European Convention. And that's because of an overinterpretation of the European Convention combined with the Refugee Convention. But it's the real problem, and this is what I encountered as Home Secretary, was that the rights of illegal migrants, the rights of foreign paedophiles, the rights of foreign terrorists become more important under the European Convention of Human Rights than the rights of the law-abiding British majority. And so I was unable to deport foreign paedophiles, deport foreign terrorists, stop the boats, because they were able to all rely on mainly Articles 3, Articles 8, and other articles of the European Convention to stop the Home Office from deporting them.
Before we explore the convention and the mechanisms for leaving it, the implications of leaving it more fully, Suella Braverman, just tell us why it is that you think third country processing is so vital. Why do we need to process people not here in the UK?
I think it is the right model. And I think it is the right model because it's worked before. If you look at Australia largely solved their maritime migration problem. They had a problem of, as they call them, boat people illegally arriving on the shores and the beaches of Australia about a decade ago. They largely solved that problem through third-party processing, and they set up processing centres in Nauru and Papua New Guinea, and they were able to remove the illegal migrants upon their arrival on Australian territory to those places for processing and detention. That model worked because it provided the necessary deterrence, because it totally undermined the business model of the gangs and the objective that the illegal migrants and the people smugglers have, which is to get a foothold in the UK. And that's why the Rwanda model must be reinstated. The Rwanda plan must be resurrected under the next government. I very much hope Labour would do it, but I don't hold out much confidence that they will. They scrapped it on day one of their administration, and they criticised it vociferously when it was in place. So they're no fans of the Rwanda model, but it is absolutely the solution to this problem, because you have a willing partner where people will be treated humanely, they will be accommodated, they will be resettled in a country that wants them. And it also avoids the situation where you've got people coming from countries where it's difficult to return them back to.
Why do you think it's taken so long for your party to come round to your point of view, Suella? There's now a lot of speculation that the Tory leader will announce finally at party conference this autumn that a Conservative government would leave the ECHR. How has it taken so long, and what damage has been done by the delay?
Yeah, I think the delay is a big problem because I think it demonstrates reluctance and a lack of conviction. And that is the concern, I think. It feels as though the Conservative Party has been dragged kicking and screaming to this policy position against its will. And that's what worries me a little bit. The big problem for the Conservative Party, I think, at the moment is credibility. People don't believe us because we made promises for the best part of a decade to cut migration, to stop the boats, and we didn't deliver on those promises, to cut taxes as well. And so saying things is falling on deaf ears amongst the British electorate. They are cynical and they don't believe us. And I think the kind of institutional or political reluctance that the party seems to be demonstrating on this particular policy doesn't really help to resolve this credibility gap at the moment. I think there's also a very strong division of views within the Conservative Party. There are many members of Parliament and many members of the Conservative Party who don't support leaving the European Convention of Human Rights. They believe that the UK should be part of these globalist transnational organisations. They believe it's part of our international reputation. They think that, we'd be classed in the same group as Russia and Belarus if we were to withdraw. Totally nonsensical argument. And they also have a sense of deference to the international legalistic order. And I think that's been shown to be wanting in recent years. We're facing a global migration crisis. Neither the EU, in the form of EU law and the European Court of Justice, nor the European Convention on Human Rights and the Council of Europe and the Strasbourg Court have been able to deal sufficiently to enable democratically elected governments across Europe to curb this global migration crisis. Pretty much every European country is struggling it. When I was Home Secretary, I would meet with other European interior ministers. Without exception, they were all struggling with their number one crisis, which was illegal migration. Germany, France, my counterpart in Italy, Spain, all of them. And we would all share our war stories of dealing with it. And so the transnational European law / international law framework has utterly failed to deal with this global migration crisis. And I think that it's high time that some of us were brave and courageous and said that it's not working, it's outdated. These are structures that were formed in the immediate aftermath of World War II for a very different era, a different time, and for very different reasons. If you look, and my paper sets this out, the origins of the European Convention on Human Rights, and indeed the original script, is nothing that I would object to. It was born out of the tragedy of World War II, with the noble aspirations of wanting to prevent authoritarianism, fascism from taking root again, ever again in the continent. And the document itself, to which the UK was one of the first signatories, sets out obligations and duties with which I would not disagree. I don't think anybody sensible would disagree. The right to life, the right against torture, the right against inhumane treatment, the right to a private life. All of these are, universal rights. But what's happened is over the ensuing 50 years, the operation of a politicized and interventionist court, the various doctrines that have been applied by that court, and the very expansive nature of the court's jurisprudence has wholly undermined state sovereignty. And that's why, in a very similar way to the arguments around Brexit, it's just not sustainable, I believe, in terms of wanting to control your borders, control your laws, control your public order, to be part of such an organisation anymore.
You remain a member of the House of Commons, of course, Suella. What would you say to your fellow Tory MPs, the many of them who are really squeamish about leaving the ECHR? To what extent are they behind the curve when it comes to public opinion, when it comes to the shift that we've seen in the much cited Overton window in recent months? Are those colleagues Conservatives?
Listen, I respect people who disagree with me, and reasonable people will disagree on this subject. Learned people will disagree on this subject. Goodness, there are many experts and eminent lawyers who would disagree with me on this subject, and for good reasons. I do think, however, that times have changed, circumstances have changed, and we are in a crisis. We are facing a systemic and unprecedented crisis in our country when it comes to the unmatched levels of illegal migration. That's posing a national security threat. It's posing a public safety threat. It's fundamentally unfair. And we can't go on like this, where it's a free-for-all on our south coast and anybody can just break into our country in this way. We cannot go on that way. There have been many attempts to reform the ECHR from within. I set those out extensively in my paper. They've all failed. Tony Blair wanted to reform our membership. He failed. David Cameron tried to reform the ECHR from within. He failed. Rishi Sunak went up to Reykjavik, I think in Iceland, and said, I want to reform by working with you, to his Council of Europe members. It failed. So there have been good faith attempts to reform from within. They've all failed over the best part of a decade. It is not consistent with border control. And the other big policy area really makes me angry and sad about our membership of the European Convention is the outrageous treatment of our brave veterans who fought in Northern Ireland during the Troubles against the IRA. And many of those British soldiers at the time were following orders, were protecting the realm, Northern Ireland, against known terrorists. And decades later, some of those same soldiers are now elderly men, veterans, who are being persecuted and prosecuted and investigated for murder because of Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights. And there has been no end of inquiry and investigation and institutional witch hunt against some of these soldiers. Some of them have been under investigation 5 times. They've been acquitted, and yet they're still being chased through the courts because of Article 2. The European Convention and the European Court of Human Rights has ruled that the families of IRA terrorists have been entitled to compensation. There are some absurdities when it comes to some of these decisions. And so the case and the plight of some of our British veterans when it comes to Northern Ireland is, again, a very strong reason why we need to leave.
So you're a Cambridge-educated lawyer, Suella Braverman. I think you passed the New York bar exams as well. You've been Attorney General, you've been Home Secretary. No one could say you lack legal experience and expertise, Suella Braverman, KC, if I may say so. Tell me about Northern Ireland. You just mentioned Northern Ireland there in a different context. We've now had the likes of Jack Straw, who, of course, was Home Secretary when the precious Good Friday Agreement was signed, saying that leaving the ECHR wouldn't unduly undermine the Good Friday Agreement. We've also had other Labour grandees, former Home Secretaries, not least Blunkett and Charles Clarke, saying we should leave the ECHR. So a two-pronged question, Suella. Why is it that you think the Good Friday Agreement will be okay? Because there's a lot of activist lawyers who are saying it won't be. And aren't the Tories in danger of being left behind? At this rate, Keir Starmer even could declare that the government will leave the ECHR before the Tories say so.
Well, if that does happen, I mean, I will eat my hat, as they say. I will. It will be the most astonishing thing if Keir Starmer vows to leave the ECHR, because, of course, you know, he was a human rights lawyer. Yeah. His one of his best friend from Chambers is now the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, who again is a.
Are you a fan?
Someone who. How do I put this diplomatically? No, I'm not. I'm not a fan. I think they're both ruining the country and our international standing.
Do you think a lot of human rights lawyers are just riding a gravy train, just got their hand out? They like all this lawfare stuff. It keeps them in clover.
Listen, I think I was a barrister. I didn't specialise in on the human rights side of things, but I did a lot of work for the Home Office, and I used to defend the Home Secretary in immigration cases in court for a period of several years, actually. And I was up against some of these lefty lawyers very often in court, and I saw that they were just doing their job mainly, but some of them have used the legal system as a campaigning tool as well, I would say. And I mean, immigration law is complex, but it's largely influenced by the Convention and human rights. And to a very high degree, the Home Office will lose its cases in court because of human rights. Illegal migrants will be able to claim human rights protections to prevent their deportation effectively, and they can game the system against the Home Office. So, you know, this goes back to over a decade when I was a humble lawyer defending the then Home Secretary, Theresa May, in court. And it was listen, the English bar, the English legal profession, I think, is one of the best in the world. We produce very high caliber advocates. Courtroom advocacy is the real skill that the English legal system offers the world. But what's happened is, because of the expansive remit of judicial review in the last 30 or 40 years, it has become a campaigning vehicle. Our courts have become a means of campaigning for left-wing activists. I mean, Lord Sumption talks about this and writes about this eloquently in his Reef lectures, actually 2019. He talks about the empire of law, and he shows quite forensically how law, assisted and aided by human rights activists, has become hijacked, if you like, by campaigners and political operators. And in doing so, the role of democratically elected parliamentarians and the role of Parliament and parliamentary supremacy have all been undermined.
And just briefly, you do feel that ECHR exit won't undermine the Good Friday Agreement?
This is a really important issue, and this is why, again, my paper deals at length with this question, because it is a serious question and it needs a serious answer, because peace in Northern Ireland is incredibly important to the United Kingdom and to the people of Northern Ireland and Ireland. And the short answer is no. Withdrawal from the European Convention on Human Rights will not undermine peace in Northern Ireland. It will not undermine the Good Friday Agreement. And there is a solution to resolving this question. Now, what I show in my paper, I go back over the origins and the evolution of the Good Friday Agreement, is that despite some people saying that the Good Friday Agreement is sacrosanct, set in stone, and refers to the European Convention on Human Rights and therefore cannot be touched, it is very much the case that the Good Friday Agreement has been changed substantively on many occasions in the last 10 20 years. The Windsor Framework is the most recent significant change to the workings of the Good Friday Agreement. It breaches the kind of very important principle of consent, you could say. In many ways, the Northern Ireland Protocol is a massive breach of the Good Friday Agreement. David Trimble, the late Lord David Trimble, one of the architects of the Good Friday Agreement, was a big critic of the Northern Ireland Protocol, saying that it ran a horse and cart through the Good Friday Agreement. And yet, peace has been maintained. So there have been many, many changes. And those are just the most recent changes. There have been many reiterations, revisions, changes, all enacted in Parliament to the terms of the Good Friday Agreement. And therefore, I say that going forward, if and when the UK leaves the European Convention on Human Rights, it should amend the Good Friday Agreement and change some of those references to the ECHR, which are contained in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And it can do that through negotiation. And it can also do that unilaterally by changing the terms of the Northern Ireland Act. And that is all within the gift of a sovereign UK Parliament. We must ensure that we don't have, to coin the phrase, a two-tier human rights system within the United Kingdom. If the UK is to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, the whole of the UK must leave the orbit of the Strasbourg Court. We cannot leave Northern Ireland in a fudge. We can't repeat some of the mistakes of the Northern Ireland Protocol. We cannot leave the Strasbourg Court with an overarching jurisdiction over Northern Ireland, but the rest of Great Britain under a different regime. The whole of the UK must be under the same human rights regime. That's important.
And finally, what's the view in the Braverman household towards reform? You've been touted as a possible defectee to reform. Your husband, of course, was famously a member of reform in his own right. Obviously, you have complete autonomy in your household, political independence. But what is the story with the Bravermans and reform, Suella? Give us a little insight into, I won't ask you about pillow talk, but discussions over coffee in the morning.
Well, listen, I mean, my husband has his own views. You'd have to ask him what his particular opinion is on any given day, for my part. He was a member of Reform and he left, so he had some disagreements with them. But listen, I mean, we can't ignore the polls. Reform is doing very well at the moment.
He's probably going to be Prime Minister, isn't he?
Well, listen, I mean, it's a very early point in the political cycle. I'm not one for making bold predictions like that at this stage, but I cannot ignore the polls. I cannot ignore what people tell me. I get hundreds of messages a day in my inbox. I meet lots of people all over the country. And what I cannot ignore, and this is what I saw at the general election and in the run up to it, is that many, many lifelong Conservatives are feeling, they're feeling disillusioned. They're feeling like they don't believe the Conservative Party anymore. They feel very, very let down on immigration. That's the main issue. They feel, and it's not necessarily illegal immigration, it's actually legal migration, where despite Brexit, despite promise after promise to cut the numbers, the Conservative government actually exponentially increased the number of work and study visas.
One last chance, is it, for the Tories to get this right, as far as you're concerned?
Listen, this is a very difficult time for the Conservative Party. We're still in the immediate aftermath of that devastating defeat last year. And it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take time and steady leadership to regain the trust of millions of people. And time will tell. Time will tell whether that is doable. For now, we will have to be happy soldiers and try our best to serve our constituents, which is what I'm doing.
Suella Braverman, thanks a lot for appearing on Planet Normal.
Thank you.
So there you go, Allison. Suella Braverman, always cogent, always, I'd say, courageous in what she says. She's not everyone's cup of tea. She certainly winds up a lot of people on the left of the Conservative Party. But when it comes to ECHR, when it comes to immigration more broadly, she's been proved right, hasn't she?
Well, she certainly has. And I thought that was the most cogent and compelling description of why the UK struggles to control its borders and deport people. I think her reputation is completely wrong. For me, she is the most personable. I mean, she came to a Planet Normal event in London, Suella did, and she was so friendly and nice to, people's children, Planet Normal listeners. She doesn't stand on ceremony. For me, she is the best kind of Tory. And I think it was quietly damning what she was saying. She knows that she's surrounded by Tories in name only. That's one of the reasons why there's this question mark over whether she might switch to Reform. I think Reform would be unbelievably blessed to have her.
And they'll definitely take her. Nigel said, many Tories will want to join us. We won't accept all of them. I'd say if she wanted to go, Suella Braverman's nailed on for a senior role in Reform, not least because people forget she was one of the so-called Spartans, only 25 Tory MPs who held out, and they're the reason Brexit actually happened. It was Mark Francois, John Redwood and others, Bill Cash. These people were the reason why Brexit actually finally got through Parliament. Priti Patel also was one of those. And Reform, certainly Farage hasn't forgotten that.
I think we are looking now, we're expecting Kemi Badenoch at the forthcoming Tory conference to announce that the Tories have decided that they will leave the ECHR, as Suella has said, as somewhat belated. Feels like they're being dragged, kicking and screaming. She pointed that out. And to be honest, Liam, I think it's very hard now for the Conservatives to say anything that people will believe. Because even if they do finally come up with these policies, why would you believe them?
As Suella just said, she thinks the delay has been damaging.
Extremely damaging. And I remember her WhatsApping me when she was on the campaign trail for the general election. Suella and Robert Jenrick, of course, notably two of the more forthright people on the right of the party, did hold on to their seats. But Suella was saying to me, my God, Allison, every other house is Reform. And that's even in Hampshire.
It's even in her house.
Even in the Braverman household. But let's just talk about, she's loyal to the leader. But we should say, Liam, that they're now disquiet that at Prime Minister's questions today, Wednesday, when we're recording this, that Kemi Badenoch, I think, should have used all 6 questions to put Angela Rayner and Starmer on the spot about this tax avoidance scandal. She alluded to it at the beginning, and then she moved on to questions about the economy, which I'm sure she'd argue is what's on lots of people's minds. But it's a blood sport, isn't it? Don't you think? Did you think it was a missed opportunity?
Yeah, politics is obviously a contact sport, and perhaps she should have gone in for the kill a bit more on Rayner. I think it's always difficult when you got lots of people giving you all kinds of different kinds of advice. I've often said to you, and I've often said publicly, that I think Kemi needs to be truer to her instincts, and she needs to just follow her gut more rather than what people around her are saying. She's changed her advisory team quite significantly over the summer. It wasn't a huge story, but nerds like you and me noticed. And I hope she can find her voice. I think the upcoming Tory conference is crucial for her. And I wonder if she's thinking now if she should have been saying earlier that Britain should leave the ECHR, given that you've now got, very senior Labour people saying we should leave the ECHR, not least, 3, it must be said, pretty darn highly respected Labour former Home Secretaries, Jack Straw, David Blunkett, Charles Clarke. These are significant people. They are heavyweights. They are political heavyweights. I didn't always agree with them when they were in office, but they both served with some distinction, and they're coherent contributors to the national debate now. And all 3 of those former Home Secretaries in recent days have said, yeah, we should leave the ECHR. Jack Straw's gone as far to say as knocking down this alarmist idea that we can't leave the ECHR because somehow that will, disrupt peace in Northern Ireland. Yeah. He was the Home Secretary when the Good Friday Agreement was signed. I know, because I was a parliamentary reporter at the time, specialising in the Good Friday Agreement for the FT, that he was heavily involved in that drafting. So he knows that legislation, as well as any living person. Now the likes of David Trimble and Seamus Mallon and John Hume have unfortunately passed on, as well as some people on the Republican side too who are no longer with us for better or for worse. So for Jack Straw to say that, he's literally saying to our political and media class as a whole, come on, get on with it. We got to do this. Stop being so queasy about this. We're the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. We need to control our borders. And I think over the summer, I think future historians will talk about the summer of 2025 when the Overton window really shifted. Even in the 3 weeks we've been off air, Allison, it shifted even more. Very bad-tempered protests, heavy-handed policing, yet more very untimely and upsetting clampdowns on freedom of speech. And I think now, unless our political class gets hold of this immigration issue, leaving the ECHR as a necessary but not a sufficient response, then I think public discontent is only going to get more stark.
Well, yes, but as Suella has indicated, you've got people in the Conservative Party who think, it'll spoil their dinner party credentials if they do anything like resigning from international agreement. Most of the Labour MPs wouldn't want to do that either. So Yvette Cooper keeps saying things like, let's temporarily remove the right of asylum seekers' families to come here and so on. But to be honest, it's just so much frost, Liam. And I do think this now is the situation where reform is the opposition. I'm in no doubt about that. The most recent polls have been astonishing. There was 2 polls ago where reform were on 35%. Their total was the combined total of Labour and Conservatives. And no matter how much certain parties want to pour scorn on that or ridicule the capacity of Farage or any of his people to run an effective government, given how well phase 2 is going, I think, as I've always said, a random selection of people from the frozen aisle in Tesco would be able to do better than this.
Tesco? You shop at Waitrose.
No, I'm moving now. I'm moving up the hill to Little, mate. I am. Canned squirrel. We're going to be on canned squirrel. But I think we should just say what this reset has shown. Labour think of it all as a comms problem, don't they? Let's just change the messaging. It's the lack of actual workable policies, which they're incapable of coming up with because they don't want to cut the state. So their hands are completely tied. But to end, Liam, this week on, I think we've seen this extraordinary raising the flags campaign across the country, which has been a defiant statement, I think, of Englishness and fighting back against all these people who say celebrating your Englishness, your Britishness is racist. And I think that the sweetest thing I heard was that people were painting England flags in potholes. Now, this is the British sense of humour for you. Paint the England flag in potholes because the council will sure as hell be round to fill it in. Isn't that good?
Now on to our listener emails. Your message sent to planetnormal@telegraph.co.uk. Please keep them coming. We learn so much from you, the citizens of Planet Normal.
Nick says, "Dear Liam and Allison, thank God you're back." Great article today, Allison. You'll find that in the show notes. I noted in the comments that I had thought to give Kemi 2 years to sort the Conservative mess out, but her silence on so many issues has convinced me that I must vote reform. I still have reservations about reform's ability to deal with the economy, the Treasury and the blob. We've seen what happens when a party with no experience of government gets elected. On a different point, could you get Lawrence Newport from Looking for Growth on the podcast, please? Thanks and keep sane. Thank you, Nick.
This is from Kerry Rose, because at the end of the last season of Planet Normal, we started talking about great British insults.
Yes, we
and
did.
let's keep that tradition going. Hi, Alison and Liam, says Kerry Rose. In response to your request for great British insults, they're all pretty good, but any British insult can be strengthened and improved by prefixing the insult with the word complete or absolute, as in complete plank, absolute tool. And Kerry's favourite use of both, a complete and absolute spanner. A fine British insult. Best wishes. Your pod is just a bright spot in my feed each week, she says.
And Anna says, now we did a little bit of Velma research, didn't we, Halligan? Yeah, so we're seeing the pink ladies of Essex who are protesting outside the Epping Hotel and elsewhere. And I looked it up, and the Peasants' Revolt of 1381 started in...
Essex. In it.
Don't know if they had tanning salons back then, did they? What was it like in 1381? Where did one go for one's gel manicure? Anyway, Anna says, the second Peasants' Revolt is definitely due, hopefully soon. As a peasant pensioner, says Anna, I find that the decline of our great British standards and strengths is heartbreaking, and I bleed for my beloved grandchildren. Several of them in Generation Z are also frankly wondering how to deal with all the ghastliness which they have to cope with and which is accelerating. The real tragedy is that it seems to be accelerating so horribly fast, and unless a miracle occurs, we are stuck with this ghastly government for 4 more years, let alone the belligerent wokes. We must inspire the truly British majority to put their heads above the parapet. Thank you, as always, for standing up for us all. Warmest wishes, Anna.
This is from Denise, who I think is a regular Planet Normal correspondent. Dear Allison and Liam, welcome back. You've been missed. We missed you too, Denise. I had a small smile to myself this week, says Denise, when not one but 2 people complained about how the government's trashed the property market and how they can't get the price that their property's worth. Firstly, Terry Wogan's son, and now the BBC's Chris Packham. I deal with people's money every day, says Denise, and I always say the same thing about property. It's not what you think it's worth that counts, it's what someone's prepared to pay. That's a market. Interestingly, both of the above-mentioned properties are priced in the millions. I should imagine if they were marketed at £50, their sellers would be inundated with viewings. They might want to start walking towards the £50 price point. When they get some takers, they will know how much their property is worth. Look forward to more amusing, horrifying and intriguing insight from you and guests now that you're back. Planet Normal superfan, I've never missed an episode, Denise. And on that bombshell, that's it from Planet Normal for another week as we leave our sanctuary of sweet reason, our flying refuge of reasoned views. Email of the week, it's my turn. And you know what? Denise, it's you, because you are a Planet Normal super fan. And we know from the way you spell your name that you've written in many, many times. So a Planet Normal mug needs to wing its way to you. Send us an email. Put mug winner in the subject heading. Give us your postal address and we will send that to you.
We had a Planet Normal special bonus episode last week, dear listeners, and we've got another one coming up this weekend too, because the co-pilot and I will be at the Reform UK conference in Birmingham interviewing a special guest. So do look out for that on Spotify, the podcast app, or wherever it is that you listen. Or if you happen to be in Birmingham at the Reform conference, please do come up. And Alec and I can always be persuaded to be bought a drink, I think. Don't you think, co-pilot?
And as we speed away from our beloved Planet Normal, 2 drinks in Alison's case, and the madness of Planet Earth comes back into view, thanks as ever to our producers, Cass Ho, James Hodgson. Please do subscribe to Planet Normal. Leave us a rating and review on Spotify, the podcast app, or wherever you listen. Stay safe and in touch with us and with each other. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.